Hello there. I am Dr. Jen. Thank you so much for joining me. I am so pleased you are educating yourself about landlording. That's great. Today we are exploring the location-specific tenancy guidelines for the state of Pennsylvania. And as in all of my location-specific episodes, I have included many resources and hyperlinks in the description of the show. So check it out, and I'm also going to screen share and reference them here. And this will be all about the Pennsylvania Landlord Tenant Act and supporting documents. Each of my location-specific podcasts is set up in the exact same way, answering the same four questions. What are the basics of the tenancy laws in that area, in this case, the state of Pennsylvania? What are the nuances in this location? What is different? What stands out? And three, some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant in Pennsylvania. And four, where to get help in the local area in Pennsylvania where your rentals are located. Then at the very end of this episode, I'll go through what I call my bingo card, which is the standard list of items that I see most often in tenancy laws in the different locations that I've been around the world. I must tell you that there are more guiding documents than what I'm giving you here. This is not everything, and there may be time changes 5 minutes after you listen to this recording in your local area. You've got to check yourself for the city, regional district, county, parish, whatever it is where your rentals are located. This is very important because this episode will get you started, but it is not the end all be all. This isn't everything. You've got to do your own research, okay? Before we get started, I'll give a plug for today's sponsor, Aloha Capital Investments LLC. If you want to know what real estate investing is all about, check it out, alohajv.com. That's alohajv.com. On that happy note, I'm going to share screen with you on Pennsylvania Landlord Tenant Act of 1951. Now remember, tenancy laws actually are laws in whatever state, province, territory that you are in. They are actual laws. So this is the first hyperlink in the description, and it is everything that you can see what's an actual law. So anything you want to jump to, you just jump to it, and the hyperlink will take you to that spot. Okay, then we go back. Okay. Next one we're going to go to is renters.equalhousing.org. This is the Pennsylvania Renters' Rights Service of Housing Equality Center in Pennsylvania. Now, this is quite a very in-depth website, and it kind of jumps around. So I'm going to go straight to Know Your Rights as a Renter in Pennsylvania. This download here is also, that's the next hyperlink. You're going to go in through here, and we'll go through as much as we can. And then you need to do some research for yourself. So this is that document here, Know Your Rights as a Renter in Pennsylvania. And as we go through, it talks about fair housing first, things to consider before renting, application, the lease before you move in, and security deposit, rent increases. It goes on and on. Eviction, falling behind on rent. And there's actually quite a bit of information on that's actually really good. That's one of the reasons why this is 76 pages long, but that's okay. So fair housing, this is federal as well as state. The Pennsylvania Human Relations Act also protects consumers against housing discrimination and adds two protected classes. Over 40, you cannot discriminate if someone is over 40, or users, handlers, or trainers of assistance animals for persons with disabilities. So there's two additional protected classes in the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, I'm going to keep going down to the next aspect because it gets to, this is reasonable accommodation, modification request letters. We've got quite a bit of quite a few episodes on this. So if you, and they've got great sample letters on this type of stuff, plus others. So you'll see this again in the sample letters when we get there. Which is right here. Here it is, reasonable accommodation request. I really like this because it allows you to create your own, but it also speak in facts. You speak in very detailed fact-based, not drama-based, not emotion-based, so that you can really make your case and not do so from an emotional standpoint. It's very rational. So according to these sample letters, you've got some different requests. This is a reasonable accommodation request, and then a reasonable modification request, things like adding handlebars, installing a ramp, things like that. Assistant animals, new construction. What do you do if you feel that you have experienced housing discrimination? There is all kinds of resources on this website and others I'm going to go through. Things to consider before renting. There's a whole bunch of them. And application to rent. Now, one of the things, the application fee may or may be non-refundable, meaning if you apply, um, then you want to make sure that if there's a fee, you understand what it's for and is it refundable or not. Also, be prepared for a credit check, background check, list of past landlords. This is really important that you have all this. Let's see. If the landlord requires a security deposit at the time of application, ask if the deposit is non-refundable. Be sure to get a receipt for all monies paid, and that's true. Ask to read the proposed lease before signing the rental application. No problem. Totally agree. It talks about rejecting an applicant, criminal backgrounds. This is interesting. Can landlord refuse to rent to someone with a criminal background? Yes, but it depends on the circumstances. U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development, which is known as HUD, issued guidance stating that because of racial disparities in the criminal justice systems, blanket bans or refusing to rent to anyone with any type of criminal history, regardless of circumstances, would most likely impact the greater Black or Latino applicants, as such and could violate the Fair Housing Act. It could appear as deemed discriminated. And so what they say is HUD's guidance states that housing providers need to consider the nature and severity of a crime and the amount of time that has passed since that person was convicted. And the housing providers must apply the criteria equally to all applicants and tenants, not just what protected class they might be in. Using criminal background as a pretext for discrimination based on a protected class is illegal. And there is an exception to the HUD guidance on criminal backgrounds. If a person possesses a conviction for the manufacture or distribution of illegally controlled substances, then they can legally be denied housing and the landlord is not in violation of the Fair Housing Act. This is interesting because I've had folks on the show before about having tenants that were cooking meth and basically wrecked her house. This is Kathy. Geez, what was Kathy's last name? Give me 2 seconds here. She was on in the show quite early on with her, hang on, 2024. Want to rent, Kathy McCarty, Toxic Real Estate. That's episode 84 in My Life as a Landlord. So if you're interested in that, check that out because that was all about, and that's the justification is that not only was that person manufacturing meth, they wrecked the property. And so that makes sense that you're not violating fair housing. Okay, let's keep going. So this talks about the lease. The lease is a legally binding contract. Make sure you are understanding the terms of what you're renting, when the rent is due, how many people can occupy the unit, how late fees, when the amount of the rent, how long is the lease, who is paying for utilities. I mean, this is pretty standard. Pet agreement and any pet security deposit. Remember, security deposit and pet fees may not be charged for assistance animals because they're not pets, right? Assistance animals are service animals. That means they are animals that have a job, which means they're not a pet. But pet agreement and pet security deposit. Rent due. Most leases state that rent is due on the first of the month. I'm no exception. You have an obligation to make sure that your rent is paid by the due date on the specific lease. And even if your landlord tells you it's okay to play a few days late, you're still bound. Changes to the lease, common lease provisions. Okay, so, and of course, it's like a genie in a bottle where you get 3 wishes and you can't wish for more wishes. You, as a landlord, cannot put unenforceable items in the lease saying the tenants cannot be held for damages in the apartment if they didn't cause it, and they can't, they can't wish things that's illegal in the lease. You can't do that. So the landlord cannot make the tenant agree to waive his or her rights to a hearing or confession of judgment. You can't do that. They talk about rental scams, record damages before you move in. They talk about lead-based paint. That's important. Smoke alarms, carbon monoxide detectors. Checklist for inspection of a rental unit. This is actually a really good one. It's quite detailed. It is 4 pages. The landlord is not required to sign this checklist, but you want to make sure if, as a tenant, I mean, as a landlord, I always walk through, or I have my team walk through and just go, is the toilet working? Is the tub working? Is there hot and cold running water? Is there any damage that's in there? Um, this is all about renter's insurance. This is a new one. Most of the time, renter's insurance is not even mentioned, but it is here. Cost of renter's insurance is somewhere 175 to $200 a year, 50 cents a day. So this is pretty standard, but I'm really glad that they mention it because not many places do. Talking about tenants' right to privacy. This is called the covenant of quiet enjoyment. This is important. So that there's no nuisances, right? So Pennsylvania law states that in every lease, whether it's written or verbal, that's interesting. I always have a written lease, but written or verbal, there is a promise that the landlord will not unreasonably interfere with your right to possess the lease premises, including the right to privacy, meaning they're not going to abuse access, right? So if the landlord enters your unit for no reason or disturbs you at night, she may be breaching the lease. Yeah, it's very interesting how some people just don't, they just walk in. It's crazy. Okay, so this is called repairs and habitability. Pennsylvania Supreme Court has ensured that tenants have the right to a decent place to live, and this is called the implied warrant of habitability. The right to live in a home cannot be waived. The right to live in a livable home cannot be waived in the lease. And so following examples are defects that are covered by the implied warranty of habitability. This is where, if you zoom out for a second, this is where we only rent units that we personally would live in. This is a warrant of habitability. So imagine if you didn't have this, okay? Lack of hot or cold running water, defunct sewage system, not ability to secure the leased premises with doors, with locks, meaning the doors and the windows, lack of adequate heat in the winter, insect or rodent infestation, leaking roof, unsafe floors, stairs, porches, or handrails, inadequate electrical wiring to the point it's a fire hazard and or lack of electricity, inability to store food safely because of a broken refrigerator unit, especially when the landlord is responsible for maintenance and repair of the refrigerator, an unsafe structural component that makes it dangerous to occupy the premises. Other examples are things like steps that are the steps going up to the front door that are aged and about to break, or maybe they have broken, right? That's a safety issue. That's a problem. So that's part of the warrant of habitability. Adequate heat. This is really interesting. I've never seen this defined before. Adequate heat depends on your local property maintenance codes, and you have got to check with your local municipality, whether it's your city, your regional district, your county, your parish, whatever it may be, regarding the International Property Maintenance Code, which tends to be the standard as the international one. This code generally requires landlord to provide heating system that is able to maintain the minimum temperature of 68 degrees Fahrenheit or 20 degrees centigrade during the winter months. In Philadelphia, if you have rentals in Philadelphia, landlords are required to maintain a system to provide heat at 68 degrees minimum from October through April. And if the tenant has control of their own heat via thermostat, the landlord is not required to keep the heat at 68 degrees minimum. That's left to the tenant's discretion. But again, you need to talk to your local code enforcement. And there's a whole bunch of things. What do you do if your unit is not habitable? There's more sample letters to landlords, reasonable time. Then it talks about withholding rent. You must be able to show that the landlord was either unwilling or unable to repair the property without a reasonable time. Proper legal advice is invaluable in the event you have something that makes the unit unlivable. Warranties, tenant remedies for a breach of the implied warranty of habitability. You can either terminate your lease and move out, withhold all or part of the rent, repair it yourself and deduct it from the rent, or you can just seek legal action and compensation. But at this point, if you're going to seek legal action, that's going to take a while. And so if you've got an immediate safety issue, you want to first get yourself safe. And it goes through these examples, which is fine. Who's responsible for extermination? It's very simple. The landlord. The landlord has to provide a livable unit, and making sure that it's not rodent or bed bug infested is part of it. Repairs not covered under implied warrant of habitability. Anything that isn't safety related, right? Cosmetic repairs such as repainting, replacing the carpets, updating the tiles, upgrading the carpentry, the cabinetry. That's not included in the implied warranty of habitability. You want to make sure that you're clear on what's included and what's not. There's some sample letters. Serious problems affecting habitability are in here. There's a bunch. Confirming repairs needed, repair and deduct. All of this is great wording, by the way. Terminating the lease for habitability reasons. First letter, second letter. Okay, now we get to the security deposit. So the security deposit is the tenant's money that the tenant gives to the landlord for protection against damages. And what happens is if all or part of your security deposit can be withheld at the lease end, if the tenant damages the property, they fail to clean it, or they fail to pay the last or any rental payment. So in this case, rent can be rent can be paid out of the security deposit. Also, if they fail to provide proper notice to the landlord that the tenant is moving out. So the limits on the security deposit. This is really interesting in Pennsylvania. So the Pennsylvania law limits the amount of security deposit a landlord can demand. During the first year of the lease, the security deposit cannot be more than 2 months' rent. Um, and so if that's a deposit, remember it's all money, but it's a deposit. The landlord might ask the tenant to pay a security deposit plus last month. Regardless of what the landlord may call it, this is last month's rent payment is still part of the 2 month maximum for the first year. So even if they take both months and make that a deposit, or 1 month is a deposit and 1 month is rent, but it's held in the first year, either way, you're limited to 2 months maximum. During the second year or any renewal of the original lease, the security deposit cannot exceed 1 month's rent. In the second year, cannot exceed 1 month's rent. And if a tenant's rent increases, the landlord can also increase the security deposit equal to 1 month's rent at the new rate for the first 5 years of the lease. And after the first 5 years, the landlord cannot increase the security deposit even if the rent is increased. That's the max. If a tenant has paid 2 months security deposit, including 1 month security and one last month's rent, after the first year, the tenant may ask the landlord to return that amount of money that is held greater than 1 month's rent, and they do so in writing, certified return receipt requested so that there's proof. And the way that the interest in Pennsylvania works on a security deposit is that if there's more than $100 collected, that the funds have to be placed in a separate account, which is a good idea anyway, because that is not your money, that's the tenant's money. The account must be in an institution regulated by the state of Pennsylvania or federal banking authorities, and the landlord must notify the tenant in writing with the name, address of the bank, and the amount of the deposit that's there so they know where their money is. After the second year, the interest earned on the tenant's money, less a 1% administrative fee to the landlord, must be paid to the tenant annually on the anniversary date of the lease. However, the law does not specify how much interest a tenant must receive. So there is a very good chance with today's interest rates being really low that after the landlord deducts the 1% fee, there may be no interest due. However, as a matter of doing good business, the landlord should notify the tenant in writing that there's no interest due on the anniversary of their lease date. Returning the security deposit. Within 30 days of the termination of the lease, the landlord must either give back the entire amount of the security deposit or a written list of any damages for which the landlord claims the tenant is responsible, with payment of the difference between the security deposit money plus interest and the money used to pay for damages. So if the landlord fails to do either of the above in 30 days, they've given up the right to withhold any security deposit, and the tenant can sue for up to double the amount of the security plus anything in interest. And note that if the tenant did not provide a forwarding address or returned the keys, the landlord cannot be held for the 30-day deadline. So there's a bit of a gray line there that defines normal wear and tear, the difference between normal wear and tear and willful damage, which is interesting. So for example, carpet that is matted is normal wear and tear, but burns or stains on a carpet is considered damage by negligence. Fading or yellowing paint is considered normal wear and tear, but large stain in carpet or holes in the wall are compensable damages to the landlord. That's damage. Okay. We'll talk about the checklist inspection for the unit. Steps to get your security deposit back when you move. This is actually a really good checklist on how to do it. So this is notice to vacate. This is actually a sample letter of how to actually give proper notice to your landlord. What to do if your landlord has not returned your security deposit. Rent increases. Pennsylvania has no rent control law. Landlords may raise the rent as much as they want. However, changes must be made in accordance with your contract slash your lease. The rent increase must follow proper notice procedures outlined in your verbal or written lease. I'm sorry, I do not agree with verbal leases. This has got to be written. But landlord may not raise the rent in the middle of a lease term unless you agree unless the tenant agrees to the rent increase. And the landlord cannot raise the rent in retaliation because of a tenant exercised a legal right. The landlord is not allowed to raise the rent because the tenant filed a complaint of discrimination or contacted code enforcement. This is all legal. This is landlord retaliation. If your rent is raised because you filed a complaint with housing discrimination, you should inform the agency where you filed the complaint. So this is talking all about rent increases, using rent increases as a retaliatory retaliatory tool. Utility shutoffs. Um, so this talks about if the tenant has not paid, the utility company cannot cut off service without attempting. Yeah, it talks to you about how to avoid this. Steps to avoid a utility shutoff. This is actually really, really helpful. What if my landlord is responsible for paying the utility bills and they still get cut off? Does there have to be an individual meter for each apartment? So the answer is yes. So if a rental unit is not individually metered, then the landlord is responsible for the utility bill, include any past due balance. You have to prorate it, especially if the house meter includes common areas. You can't just charge people for common areas. Can my landlord shut off my utilities because I am behind in rent? No, you cannot do that. If you have trouble paying utility bills, they talk about how to do this, and there's all kinds of help between with living inside Philadelphia or outside Philadelphia, falling behind on rent, evictions, how to do a notice to quit, and then how to do a court hearing and getting a judgment. Order of possession. These are all really good, but it just takes a while to do it. Oh, here we go. This is winner, winner, chicken dinner right here. This is the one you want. This is on page 63. Eviction notice timetables. This is really handy because it takes all the legalese and it puts it right in a table where you go, if the reason for eviction is, let's say, acts relating to illegal drugs, then you give them a 10-day notice to quit. Or let's see, expiration, how about a breach of a year or less in lease? Either the lease is expired because it ends abruptly, or there's a general breach of a violation. There's a lease violation within the first year. You can give them 15-day notice. If it's longer than 1 year, you give them a 30-day notice. Okay, so then it goes through a bunch of question and answers about eviction. How do you get your belongings back? This is all about abandoned property. If you're evicted and move out of a rental property, you have 10 days to contact your landlord and let them know you intend to retrieve your personal property left behind. Consequently, the landlord should be also trying to contact the tenant saying, hey, you've got your stuff here, because if the landlord doesn't get the tenant stuff out, then the landlord has to then take and store and give notice, and it's a real pain. After you contact your landlord saying you want to get your belongings, you have 30 days from the day you were evicted or from the postmark date of your landlord's notice for you to retrieve your personal property. Okay, if you're evicted, your landlord does not have to send you notice that your personal property was left behind. You have to contact your landlord on your own. Okay, so this is pretty standard. So it's 30 days. You have 30 days. And the landlord can start charging you a storage fee after 10 days. Okay. So magisterial district court, magisterial, I think I'm saying that right. So this one is a locally affected elected official. This judge, magisterial district judge, is a locally elected official who can decide small civil suits such as landlord-tenant matters. It looks like this is kind of like small claims in other locations. Defense. So this explains exactly how to do this, especially if a security deposit is not given back or proper accounting is not given back. So this is talking about objections, relevancy, hearsay. So this is about what happens if the house or the unit goes into foreclosure or it's sold in a sheriff's sale. And they're everything is saying consult an attorney or call legal aid. Yeah. Okay, so then it goes into resources. There's all kinds of resources in Pennsylvania. It's actually really impressive. They've got 3 offices here for disability rights, but there's a whole bunch more local lawyer referral locations. 211 United Way. So you can just pick up the phone in Pennsylvania and dial 211, and it's a information hub that will help you. Hawaii has the same thing. I know because I'm on Maui United Way, but this one, just dial 211 and just say, I need information regarding housing, or I'm getting evicted, or whatever it is. And they'll be able to at least guide you for help. And I'm just looking if there's anything else in this document. There is not. Okay, so let's go on to the next one. So this one is palawhelp.org. This one is authored by Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, yet another place you can go for help. And there is a bunch of information about eviction help. I'm just showing this on the screen about being evicted. What can you do? Why can my landlord evict me? What are some reasons the eviction could be illegal? It talks about written notice. This is actually really helpful. Okay, gonna go to the next one. Pennsylvania Association of Realtors. So if you are looking for a place to be a member in Pennsylvania, this is one you might consider joining. There is a members area that if you've got a problem, you can call. So they've got the Pennsylvania Association of Realtors legal hotline. This is for members. Yeah. So interesting. Even if you're not a realtor, that might be interesting. Then the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. This is yet another aspect. There's the Federal Fair Housing, but now this is Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission created this act. These are all the hyperlinks that I'm including in the description of this episode, by the way. So understanding landlord-tenant law in Pennsylvania. Now this is a legal services place. So I try not to endorse corporate locations, but I'm also trying to provide you resources. So there's kind of a bit of a fine line here. So they have a bit of some guidance on Pennsylvania tenancy items. And then this is the same, I've mentioned iProperty Management before, and it's just a reference for you. And then the last one is Disposition of Rental Property Landlord Tenant Act of 1951. So this is abandoned personal property to help you with what to do. But we do have that information that what happens if you've evicted a tenant and they've left abandoned items behind. Okay. Let's leave you with this one as we go through my bingo card. By the way, if you're looking for help in Pennsylvania, you want to go to the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network, which is palawhelp.org, or the Pennsylvania Legal Aid Network is palegalaid.net. Either one of those will help get you started, especially if you are either got questions or you're in a pickle and you need some help. That will help you. Okay, let's go through my bingo card and then we'll wrap up this episode. Tenant application fee. Yes, you can charge a tenant application fee. It does not say how much, but it must be reasonable, right? That's probably pretty standard, but it doesn't actually give you guidance on the dollar amount or specifications. Grace period for late rent without penalty. It doesn't talk, nothing said about a grace period or a late fee. It did say that you've got to put something in for a late fee. Security deposit, you can pay money, which sometimes some other locations you can have a bond. In this case, you can't. And you must put it in a separate account if the deposit is more than $100, which it very likely is. In Pennsylvania, a landlord can charge up to 2 months rent for a security deposit, or 1 month security deposit, 1 month's last month's rent. And that's in the first year of the tenancy. Lease wording and details. Yes, there's a list of information about what must be contained in the lease. Is an emergency contact required? No, there isn't. And this is interesting. In the event that the tenant abandons, is incapacitated, dies, or is imprisoned, in Pennsylvania, there is no emergency contact. That would be one thing I would recommend Pennsylvania require. Pets and animals, there is a pet deposit that you can charge, and it didn't say anything about pet rent, but they did mention pets. Doesn't appear to be any delivery requirement of a signed lease or a condition inspection at move-in for the landlord, even though I think it's good practice, but the tenant is recommended that you do a condition inspection. They actually provide one, which is good. Standard warning letters or wording. Yes, they provide a ton of sample letters, which was great. Is there required maintenance inspections mentioned? Nope, but it's also, again, best practice. How often can rent be increased? There is no rent control in Pennsylvania, so there is no specification. The only thing they say is that you cannot increase rent in the middle of a leasing period. Like if you're in a 1-year lease, you can't increase the rent at 8 months unless the tenant agrees to it, which they probably won't, but maybe they would. What is proper notice on a rent increase? It doesn't say specifically, but I would say somewhere between 60 and 30 days, somewhere in there. But you want to make sure that whatever the proper notice is that you're doing for your rent increase, that you are giving proper notice. But I didn't see anything in there. How much is the rent increase? Again, no rent control, so they can increase it to whatever they'd like. Renter's insurance is mentioned. It does not appear to be required. A fixed lease ends abruptly. It does not automatically convert to periodic or month to month. Condition inspection at move out. Again, not required, but a good idea, especially if you're going to withhold some or all of the security deposit. Return of deposit. You have 30 days as a landlord to either give an accounting or return the full deposit. And if you don't, you can pay up to double the amount of the deposit. Can you use the deposit as last month's rent? Yes or no? It depends. It looks like in the first year, you're withholding a security deposit. And then if you're going to keep 1 month's rent, then you give it back. But then in year 2, who knows? It doesn't appear that that's a thing. So I don't think so. Landlord retaliation defined. It is defined, but normally landlord retaliation also has timing with it because there's usually a timeline that says you can't retaliate, you can't do an eviction or threat of an eviction or a threat of a rent increase or present a rent increase in so many months, right? There appears to be some kind of a timeline and so it is defined. Landlord retaliation is defined, but no timing. Do you go third-party housing for disputes? Nope. Looks like you go right to court in Pennsylvania. Okay, on that note, I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to wrap up this episode by saying that each of my location-specific podcasts is set up in the exact same way, answering the same 4 questions. What are the basics of the tenancy laws in that location? What are the nuances in the location? Some guidance about abandoned items left behind by a tenant and where to get help in your local area. And then I reviewed my bingo card of standard items that I see most often in tenancy laws in the different locations worldwide. This is the same format for every location-specific episode, so if you're interested in another geographic area, you already know the framework I'm going to do, and then we'll just change the location. But again, I must tell you that this episode is not all-inclusive. You must do your own research further in your specific geographic area, including your city, county, regional district, parish, whatever it may be. You've got to do your own location research for your rental location, but today's episode will get you started. If you're listening to this podcast, chances are that you're either new to real estate or you're new to real estate in Pennsylvania. So here's 2 additional things that might help you. 1, read the Pennsylvania Landlord Tenant Act. Yes, I know it's dry. Do it. Educate yourself on playing the game in Pennsylvania. 2, check out your local meetup group in your city, county, parish, regional district. Try to get in the room with other landlords who have rentals in Pennsylvania. This will help you get in the mindset. You'll be able to understand some of the wins, some of the challenges, some of the lessons learned in your area. Very important. So just Google Meetup or jump on social media and ask questions. There are local folks asking questions just like you are. You'd be surprised how many people are asking questions. If you learned from something from today's show, could you please give me a review on whatever platform you listen to this episode on, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or maybe you listen to this at mylifeasalandlord.com. I hope you enjoyed this show today about Pennsylvania. I'm recording this episode in Desolation Sound, north of Vancouver, British Columbia, on my boat. Why? Because real estate takes you places. Where do you want real estate to take you? Join me in the next episode live right now in the library, episode 166 about the great province of Alberta.